Good afternoon, and thank you for joining today's webinar on making the switch to virtual instruction. My name is Corey Pelk, and I'm the Director of Member Services for SSDA. Just a couple of housekeeping tips before we start. All attendees are muted, so if you have any questions, please feel free to type them in the question box on the right-hand side of your screen, and we will field those either throughout the webinar or at the end. We have also uploaded some handouts for you. There's about 5 of them, including a PDF copy of the presentation you're about to see. And that is also in the should be on the right hand of your screen, right side. There'll be a little handout box. If you have trouble finding it, let me know. I'll also be able to send those out to you via email after this is over. With that, I'm going to turn this over to Rick.
Thank you, Corey, and thank you, SSDA, for allowing us to present this webinar to you. Also, thanks to Tim Taylor, your Executive Director as well, for providing us feedback on what your member services or your member needs are in these challenging times. My name is Rick Blomquist. I'm a Rural Education Manager with Edmentum for the state of California. Who is Edmentum? Well, Edmentum is a K-12 educational technology provider founded in 1960, and we believe in innovation and being committed to our educators as our most trusted partners in creating successful student outcomes everywhere learning occurs. And we're so pleased to be able to present this webinar, Best Practices for Teachers and Administrators Making the Switch to Virtual Instruction. And this is really part 1 of a two-part series. We're going to be holding a Q&A session next week at this exact same time because we know there's a lot of questions that teachers and administrators have about making the switch to virtual education. Our country is experiencing challenges we've never seen before, with over 55+ million kids out of the classroom and now in a virtual learning environment. And with those unique challenges come other challenges from all sides: teaching, learning, administrative. So it's important to get together and talk about how to effectively launch an e-learning plan, connect with students and parents, how to plan your day effectively, and other important topics that we'll be talking about today. Joining me today are Kelly Norwood. She's a Director of Academy Professional Learning for Edmentum. She has over 20 years experience as a classroom teacher, department chair, district curriculum developer, administrator, virtual teacher. She'll be kicking off our presentation. Carrie Kelly will be joining her. She's elementary K-5 virtual teacher with Edmentum with over 20 years experience as a teacher, 7 of those in the virtual environment. And finally, Ashley O'Neill has been an educator for over 17 years as well, with over 11 of those in online education, and teaches secondary education with Edmentum. So combined, our presenters have over 50 years teaching experience, more than half of which are in the virtual environment. We're excited to offer some best practices for you, and in today's webinar, we'll be exploring different questions to consider as you make that transition. So with that said, I'd like to toss it over to Kelly and take it away. Thanks, Kelly.
Awesome. Can everybody hear me okay? I was having some audio issues earlier. Rick, can you hear me?
Yes. Yep, I can.
Yes. Okay, I think there might be a little bit of delay in my sound, in my audio, so we'll see how it goes. But thank you everybody so much for attending today and being here with us as we get to share with you during this very uncertain and unprecedented time some of our best practices that we have successfully implemented over the years of working with virtual instruction. And so we are excited to not only be here with you today, but also to be able to provide a second session that will be designed specifically for you to either have questions that come out of today or just bring questions that we're unable to answer during our session. So one thing to think about when we're trying to make this transition from the brick and mortar to the virtual classroom, really before we allow our teachers to share all the incredible things that they have successfully done over the years, I think it's really important to stop for a second and think about the foundation of that. And so what does it really take in order to be successful making that transition, whether it be for a short period of time or maybe it even be for a long period of time, whether this is something you want to create as an opportunity down the road or something that you want to be prepared for if something uncertain and actually were to happen like this, or just even deal with right now in the moment. So one strategy that we have found when working with partner schools and really kind of developing this out for them and being a partner and a consultant is the surveying. And as a mother myself, working from home full-time, and also now in a situation where I have to be a partner with the teacher in a virtual setting, it has been a really interesting transition in that regard. And so knowing your families on a teacher level and an administrative level is very, very important, as well as the teachers knowing what your teachers are undergoing and what their home situation is and what sort of instruction they can provide and when really goes a long way and is really the first step. We have created a survey, and I certainly can send that out or have Corey send that out afterwards, that really just asks the critical questions to families and to teachers that, what's your home life like? Are you home all day? Are you working? Are your kids having to go to work with you? My husband's a custom home builder, and he shares with me a lot how many of his subs bring their kids to work all day long now. And so that really impedes their ability to do classwork during the day. So we have to be very cognizant of the many situations we're uncovering. As an example of myself, I work all day, and so my time to sit down with my 7-year-old and work with her is very limited. So that usually happens after dinner at about 8 or 8:30. So it's important to know the different dynamics in order to create your plan to work with your students and to work with your teachers. And so that survey is powerful. The second piece to that is investigating the options. So really spending the time deciding what is it that you want your students to learn and what sort of available options in terms of content or platform is out there that you can ease of use for teacher and ease of use for families and your students. And then once you decide on that as a collective group, right, you collaboratively as a team of administrators and teachers, maybe even getting some feedback from your parents as well to try something and let you know if they thought that was something that works. But once you decide on those two things, your families, the situations, you've decided on a platform of how you're going to be continuing to educate your students, then almost just as if not important is the communication piece. So being sure that everybody involved in this process and this plan is on the same page. And so the administrators communicate to the teachers and the teachers communicate that to the students and the families. Understanding that piece, as long as everybody understands that here's where we're at and here's how we're going to get where we need to go, and being open to adjusting. So I can give you an example. When we kicked this off, my 7-year-old had 6 different logins for all different subjects, and it was trying. And the teacher was very good at soliciting parent feedback. How is this working for you? And about 3 weeks in, we totally made a transition and changed to something that had 1 login, and it was just fantastic for everybody. But I loved the flexibility from the administrative staff at my children's school and from the teachers to really listen to the parents and listen to the students of what was working and be willing to say, hey, we're going to try something different now that we're into this. And so be willing to adjust. Solicit that feedback, really continue to have that strong pulse with your teachers and saying, hey, how are things going, right? Is what's working and what's not working? And where, as an administrative team, can we come in and provide additional structure and support? And then the teachers really having that intimate relationship with families that maybe they did have or didn't have, but now they need to have in terms of what's working, how can I support you, being a real person, saying, I have an 18-month-old and I'm trying to teach too, and trying to just be honest with each other and have a lot of grace. Be forgiving to yourself, be forgiving to your parents, be forgiving to your teachers, and understand that this is a really difficult time and we're all in it together, and some beautiful things are going to come out of having to learn to do things differently. One of the greatest things that the teachers will talk about is the ability to really personalize using virtual education. And last but not least, a very passionate piece for me as a director of Academy Professional Learning is not to let go of that professional development piece. And so our teachers are hungry to know more and to learn and to have advice and support. And so really, as an administrative team, for those administrators on here, is providing that virtual professional development, giving the teachers an opportunity to still come together, develop them, provide best practices, even bring in some experts from the community or from the virtual community to come in and host these sessions that are very personal with your teachers. You can do teams like your first grade team, your second grade team, your secondary teams, and continue to show them that this is important to you and that you want to give them the skills and the tools they need in order to successfully implement this and feel good about what they're doing and continue to allow students to thrive and learn. So with that said, I'm very excited to transition into our teacher experts. to start talking about, we have about 4 or 5 questions today that they're going to be able to share with you. We have Carrie, who's a K-5 expert, and we have Ashley, who is a secondary expert. So you're going to get a little bit of a view into some of the similarities with teaching the younger kids and the older kids, and then some of the differences.
Thanks. So I'm Ashley, and I would like to start just by talking about the question that comes up most often when I have teachers who are transitioning into an online setting, and that is, what is my day supposed to look like? It's tempting when you have a computer in front of you all of the time for your online presence as an educator to be 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And that's just not a sustainable model. So I would urge every teacher new to this online setting to set boundaries around your time for yourself and to teach the students how to reach you in a realistic way. So, for example, if an email comes in at 10:30 at night and it pops through on your phone and you know the answer and it's a quick little thing, you can send a quick email out, it's not a big deal. That also is going to mean that the students then will become expectant that you are going to be answering their 10:30 emails. So it's important that you set boundaries around your time so that you aren't going to get burnt out, right? It's not a sustainable model to be online constantly. I also feel like it's important to set boundaries in your physical space where you have work in a work section, even if it's a section of your dining room table, but you have work in a work section. And then when it's time to focus on your family, your kids, your own mental health, you step away from work and you don't mix the two together. As much as possible, keep those things separate, because you are an online teacher, but you also are a human being who needs to take care of themselves. So set those healthy boundaries to make sure that you are able to be the best teacher you can be by being as fully present as you can in those moments and then taking yourself away from it in other moments. It's also important to work smarter and not harder. So instead of meeting with 15 students talking about the same thing 15 times, make sure that you're setting up some groups where you can have several students meeting with you at one time to talk about a similar topic. Also, if you have students who need help at random times during the day, implement something like an office hour where they can come in every day from these 2 times, from 1 to 2 is my personal office hour. My students don't have to make an appointment. They just show up in my online classroom. We work on whatever it is that they need. So using some of those structures will help you to know this is when I'm available. It's also important to set time into your schedule for everything that is important to you that gets done. Communication, and we're going to talk about that later, but communication is such a huge important piece of what you do as an online educator. So it's important to actually schedule communication time into your day. Every time the phone rings, you can't stop what you're doing and go answer the phone. You're never going to get anything done. You're going to be constantly chasing the tail of whatever it is you're trying to accomplish. So let that phone call go to voicemail, because in 1 hour, I'm going to be checking my voicemails and I'll get back to it. So if you set it up that way where you know that everything that is important has a time that it gets done, you're going to schedule your day in such a way that you can get everything finished in that amount of time without feeling burnt out. So that is my plug for those boundaries and that schedule. Carrie had some great ideas as well.
So I have, now this is something that I did for myself, going from the brick and mortar classroom and into the virtual world. And Kelly, if we can go ahead and skip to the next one. I actually created a sample schedule. This helped me really kind of, just as Ashley was explaining, organize my day to make sure that I was not kind of overworking, and to make sure that I knew clearly when I was going to be meeting with my kids, and when I would have time for planning and grading. So you can see, and I will tell you that I have that 8 to 6 kind of a time frame, and of course I would take breaks in between, but some days it might have been just 8 to 4, some days it might have been 9 to 5, that sort of a thing. So you can see how I've organized here. I've got Monday through Friday, and you'll also notice I have I teach online. I teach 3rd, 4th, and 5th grade. So I have live sessions scheduled for them, my 3rd graders, my 4th graders, and my 5th graders at separate times. But then I also have live help where I am just available as like Ashley was describing as her office hours. That's kind of my office hours too, where the kids can pop in if they have questions, if they're not able to make my live sessions, or even if they're more comfortable just kind of working one-on-one and not with other students, because during my live help time, I will work one-on-one with students. So kind of carving that out in your week when it works best for you, but then also allowing your kids to know when you are accessible so that if they have questions, that's extremely important. Yes, I have fit in time for lunch because you have a tendency to skip right through lunch. So make sure that you are taking care of yourself. That is extremely important. And for a while there, I was actually taking my lunch and walking. So I'd get out of the house and I'd go for a walk and come back. So that's really, really important. I have my department meetings as well as I have fit in there when I'll be planning, grading, and then also notice I have the communicating with others at those times. So those are times that I will reach out to my students, my site coordinators, or even parents if I need to. So again, that's a schedule that works for me, but certainly, make do with what you can and set up your own schedule. And it has helped me tremendously. So, okay. I think we're moving to the next. Yep.
Yeah, so communication, like I said before, is so incredibly important in this online environment, even more important than as you go into it, you're going to feel like, oh yeah, it's important that I'm communicating well, but you need to take it even a step farther most of the time. It's going to, at the beginning, almost feel like you are over communicating with your expectations. It's important to not over communicate in the amount of times that you're communicating, but in the expectations that you're communicating. This was made super clear to me as I have my own kids who are home with me now, and I have a 6th grader, and he needed to contact his teacher, and I said, okay, email your teacher and tell her XYZ. And he didn't know how to write an email to his teacher, and I was shocked. I hadn't even considered that. So I walked him through how to send an email, how to make sure there's a subject line, sign your email, make sure that you put what class you're in so your teacher knows where to find you in her grade book and all of that. And then I asked him to call another teacher. And again, you would have thought that I'd asked him to do something exceptionally embarrassing because he was just mortified that he had to speak on the phone to this teacher. So you're going to need to set up that expectation with your students. Let them know that you expect to talk to them on the phone. Let them know how to email you and some of those best practices of emails that they may not be aware of, about making sure they include their name and it doesn't just say soccer fan 27, but they actually have their name in their email, and make sure that they tell you what course they're in and their phone number to get in touch with you, to get in touch with them, and that kind of thing. You're going to need to teach them how to communicate with you and how to communicate with you the most effectively. When you are communicating, though, make sure that you're not sending 15, 20 emails that say roughly the same thing or that could have been all joined together with one. I was just complaining to my family tonight that my kids' schools, I get a phone call from each principal every night and from the school district, and then I get those same voicemails as a transcript in my email each night as well, and it's too much. I could do with just one of those communications. They all say the same thing. And so I start to tune them out, right? I don't answer the phone every night now when I see the school number, because I know that it's just going to be one of these 932 messages. But sometime it's going to be important that I pick up the phone, and I will have sent it to voicemail and I won't be paying attention. So make sure that your communication is clear. Brene Brown says clear is kind. So be clear in what you are expecting students to do to communicate with you. Make sure that you are communicating what is important and that you are not communicating more than what is important. Make sure that everything that you do has a purpose and that you know that what they are getting from you is what they need to know from you for that moment. I also wanted to mention that there are a lot of systems in place, especially the bigger districts already have systems in place for how they can take phone calls that are sent to the school and it forwards it to your home and all of that. But I know that especially with some smaller districts, that may not be possible. So we personally use Google Voice in my department. We use Google Voice. It's a free phone number that I can give out to my students, and it comes through to my personal phone. But I'm not giving my personal phone number out to my students. It also keeps track of all of my text messages and phone calls. So if my department head or if my principal wants to know, hey, show me how you're communicating with your students, I literally can take screenshots, I can access it online and send him a copy of the transcripts of messages that have been left for me, text messages with my students, and that kind of thing. It's very easy to use. So I would strongly suggest that if you don't already have a way to have a phone number aside from your personal number, that you look into Google Voice. I know that there are others. I don't personally have experience with others, but there are free options out there for you to use to have a phone number to communicate with your kids. And then as you're communicating, make a phone call to each of the families. Hopefully you've done that by now, but if you haven't, make a phone call to each of those families. And I tell my students to save my number as Miss O'Neill, math teacher, so that all they have to do in their phone is type math teacher and they can easily find me. So especially when they have so many names and numbers that are going around, if you give them those little tips that make it easy for them to communicate with you, then you're going to have a higher success rate of them actually reaching out or answering the phone when you call.
The next slide we have is how do you engage students and colleagues virtually? So we have several different ways that we engage students, and I have the next slide will give me a list of those kind of online video options that we have. Some of the things that I personally do at the elementary level to help keep students engaged is I always allow for some kind of free welcome and what's new time at the very beginning of the lessons. That allows the kids to talk to one another, and it allows me to get to know and get a feel for how things are going at home. And I think that helps the students really connect and stay engaged. Once a week, I'll do a Star Student of the Week, and I have a nice little PDF that I use that I'll put the student's name, and we do a little celebration. I use Kahoot, just like you would use in the brick and mortar classroom, so many of you may have used that. Another thing to keep them engaged is through different platforms like Zoom. You can actually have students share their screen, or they can actually control the mouse, and that helps get them pretty excited about what's going on virtually. Depends on the number of students that you're working with too. So that would be a decision that you would make if you think that they can handle it. But I would say that it definitely keeps the students engaged and excited about what's going on. I use other online tools like Book Creator. Google Docs is great because you can provide feedback right away and the students will get the feedback, which is another way that we like to keep students engaged, is through our feedback. Being accessible to students, which we've already talked about, and Ashley just went over how to communicate with different students and their families. Making your lessons, and I find especially at the younger grades, because I work with kindergartners and first graders. We have had online lessons with them as well. We just want to keep those lessons short, keeping in mind their attention span. Smaller groups when meeting in live sessions. I'm going to share this experience. This was something that I realized with my own students. I have a 6th grader and an 8th grader who are now working virtually. And my 6th grader has been meeting in live sessions once a week, 8:30 on Thursdays. But he's meeting with his entire team. So there are 4 teachers with at least 25 students each. And so at times there are close to 100 students all on Zoom, or Google Hangouts is what they're using. And, that was kind of cool the first week as they're trying to get to know and everybody was getting familiar with it. But I do have to say that I I would recommend really trying to stick to smaller groups when you're meeting in live sessions, maybe just by classroom or even smaller class sizes if you can. It helps to keep the students engaged, and it's just a little bit more manageable, I think. So that would be my suggestion there. Always providing positive feedback, because again, as we mentioned earlier, we don't know, what's going on at home, and we want this to be a time for them to really at least be able to connect, especially in what we're living in right now, where they're not out socializing as much. And so providing any positive feedback and in a timely manner helps keep them engaged and hooked on what you're doing. Teaching them self-motivation and buy-in. I call that buy into their day. They have control of their day. If they can choose, they can pick and choose their day. And I'll show you a schedule in a little bit that I've created that helps allow students to just kind of, okay, well, they can decide when they want to do what, which allows them a little more control, which I think helps them really, really buy into what they're doing now. Providing opportunities for students to improve their work. So, if they don't do so well on one assignment, also online, you can have them go through and have them fix their work and show them again that control of their own personal learning to help keep them self-motivated. And then keeping it light and fun. We want them to come back. We want them to continue to come, and we want it to be an opportunity for them to, smile and get to see their teachers and get to see some of their students too. So that's some suggestions that we have on keeping students engaged. There are also all sorts of online tools that that are also, Kelly, if we could switch back, there you go. Thanks. Online tools that I use on a regular basis as well that will help keep students engaged, but are extremely helpful to the online teacher when you're working in a virtual world. One of them especially is mathlearningcenter.org, which, and you'll find also that whatever you used in the classroom, you can then apply to what you're doing online as well. So, but I did want to point out at least mathlearning.center.org does a great job, because they have like base 10 blocks and money and geoboards, those kind of manipulatives that we would use in the classroom at the elementary level. You can actually use them as models online, which is great. Depending upon the platform that you're using and what kind of tools are in there, online textbooks have text-to-speech tools that highlight the words and it will actually read in other voices that are fun to use just to help kind of add a little more excitement to the day. Other examples are Padlet, concept mapping, BrainPop, all the videos. We also recommend virtual field trips. That's always fun if you're meeting with students, maybe 2 or 3 times a week. Maybe one of them can be a virtual field trip that you take together. We would also encourage virtual clubs, like having a book club, a reading club, a cooking club, even photography. Those types of things are fun. They help build that community online as well that allows the kids to stay engaged and want to come back and continue to find this an exciting time. It's different, but it's also can be a very exciting time as well. So, and finally, I just said, depending upon your online platform, they also might, I have found that like a to-do list works best for students, and I'll share that in a little bit, but you also will have collaboration tools. Like I have a collaboration tool, which is my texting. I know Ashley had mentioned Google Voice for her texting with the older kids. As the younger kids, I do have a texting tool within my platform that I use, and then some other kind of online tools that are great, ExactPath, Study Island, and so forth. So good for online tools.
For those of you who were in a brick and mortar setting and are transitioning to online, you actually have a little bit of an advantage. Well, it's hard to imagine that any of this is an advantage, but in an online setting, the hardest part is forming those connections with your students and building the rapport and the relationship with your students that comes from being in front of them in a classroom. So if you are comparing your situation to just a straight up online teacher, you already have that hard piece done of learning what your students are motivated by and getting to know know them. So capitalize on that, right? The things that motivated them when they were in your classroom are still going to be things that motivate them now. It doesn't have to be, you know, extra credit or an extra quiz grade. Sometimes all they need to know is that they were the one who gets to say that they won that game, right? They won the trivia game, and they can talk about that to their friends. Those kinds of things actually do go a long way. So that part of engagement, you have a little bit of an advantage on, is that you already understand them. But the biggest thing that I remind teachers of when they ask me, how do I keep these kids engaged? They're just not doing the work, is to give grace in this situation to these kids and to their families. So we have teenagers who are 17 years old who are trying to do their own work, and then they're also trying to help younger siblings do their work as their parents are going to work. We've got people who are sick. We've got people who have limited access to the internet. Maybe they can download things, but they can't stream their videos. Maybe they don't have a place in their home where they are able to get onto Zoom and turn their camera on without you seeing chaos behind them. Maybe they don't have a quiet space where they can call their teacher because they don't want you to hear their background of people yelling and people being angry behind them. So there's a lot that is going into student engagement right now. The biggest piece of online education that I love is the fact that I can meet students where they are. And where Samuel is and where Jimmy is are usually two very different places. But I have the ability within my platforms and with this environment to be able to meet Samuel where he is and meet Jimmy where he is and move them both towards their goals. And sometimes those expectations are different. Maybe you have a student who can easily log on and do the work that you are assigning to them, and they call you and they come to your Zoom meetings and you are really engaged with them and everything is going well. That is a success story. But maybe you've got Jimmy who's taking care of his little brother and he is not able to get on Zoom, but you're able to talk to him on the phone and encourage him to continue reading or to continue practicing for your specific subject. That is also a success. So success is going to look differently for different students based on where that individual is, and that is okay. For you as administration, it's important that you make sure that your teachers know that there's not a one size fits all approach to what is going on in their classrooms, and that they have the ability to do what is best for each individual student, not just this group of 200 students as a whole. That piece is super important, that we're giving grace in these times to these kids, because everybody is doing the best that they can do in this moment. And for some people that means easy access to school, and for other students that doesn't mean easy access to school. Sometimes, as Kelly was saying, that's doing it after dinner in that small window of time when mom is finished with work and can work with you to teach you. So give grace in those moments with that student engagement. Make sure that they are engaged, yes, but make sure that you are giving them all of the tools that they need to be able to be successful with what you've asked of them.
Awesome. We have about 20 minutes. And this is our last question that we have.
Yeah. So,
How
Carrie,
do you
did you want to
monitor
start, or
progress?
would you like me to start?
I'll get started, even though I'm the last bullet there. So.
Oh, that's right. That's right.
We'll go ahead. Yeah, because we'll just take turns going back and forth. So this is a good question. How do you monitor student progress? And it's really going to vary on the platform that you have and kind of the assignments that you are providing to students. And Ashley will go into discussing that a little bit further. However, I do have a sample. I find, because in my platform, we have what's called a suggested daily schedule, which is pretty easy. It's a setup in 5 days, just like the work week would be. And they hit, because I'm at the elementary level, they hit ELA, math, science, and social studies every day. So their courses are set up in a very nice, I like to call it a to-do list. Yeah, and so that to-do list is nice and easy. Students can see what, oh, hello?
Hello?
Okay. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. I think somebody
Okay.
else was unmuted.
Oh, okay. All right. Okay. And so that to-do list I find has been very, very helpful for students. If we can click to the next one, I'll share a sample of actually a checklist that I created for my students, and then also a checklist that I've actually gotten as a sample from my student, my son, who is in 6th grade. So the first one I created for my own kids. It's just kind of set up as a at-home daily academic activities. You'll notice that 9 to 12 they like to sleep in the morning, so I kind of gave them that leeway. They like to stay up a little bit later, but they have to at some point wake up between 9 and 12, and their job is to wake up, get dressed, brush teeth, and eat, and then they have to watch the morning announcements. And they actually physically check it off. I prefer it. It's one way for me to see, have my students done the work, have my kids done the work that they need to do as well. And then they spend about 30 minutes on each of those different activities there. I just find that it helps keep the students engaged as well. So my own kids know what they need to get done. They can pick and choose. Our work times are from 11 to 4 p.m. They take a lunch break from 1 to 2, but then they work for 2 hours, take a break, and then work for another 2 hours, and then they're done for the day. So similar to the way I structured my own schedule as a teacher, we have it scheduled for them. The other example that I have there, as you can see, is another checklist. It was created through Google Docs, and this was given to my son in 6th grade, and it just kind of shows Monday through Friday. So I really truly believe that those to-do lists are helpful in also monitoring how students are doing at home. So we'll take it. Ashley, you can take it on.
Yeah.
Tell a little bit more about data collection.
Yeah. So one of the things that I think is, well, first of all, I'm a math teacher, right? So I'm a bit of a nerd, and I will completely embrace that. But I think it's super interesting, all of the different pieces of information that learning management systems can provide for us. And it's impossible for me to know what learning management system each of you is using. And some people aren't using a learning management system at all. You're simply relying on email or different ways of communicating with students for those assignments. But I would start with whatever platform you're using by talking to your administration and asking what reporting features are available in that platform. So for example, in the platform that we use at Edmentum, I'm able to see when my students last logged in. I'm able to see how many minutes they spent on each assignment. I just had a conversation with a family a couple hours ago, and their child said that they had worked for 8 hours on math today. And I was able to say that the child has not spent 8 hours in math all semester. And he logged in today, and he was logged in for 1 minute and 43 seconds. And I can see that he opened this assignment, but he did not answer anything. So the system tracks so much of what is happening, but you have to know to ask for that information, right? So start by talking to your administration. Those of you who are administrators, if you aren't aware of what reporting is available, talk to your tech group, because they can tell you how to find all of those different data points. And then once you have those data points, consider putting it all together in a spreadsheet. I've created a spreadsheet that you can use just as a sample, that you can list the assignments and then simply check off as students complete those assignments. You can also go in and note that you've communicated with students each week. That is in some of the resources that we've sent to you. It's nothing big, but it just is a way for you to look at a spreadsheet and be able to say, oh, I can see on this assignment, Jimmy is still missing this. It's easy for me to reach out and talk to him about that. If you have all of it in different places, it's difficult to do that. So talk to your administration, figure out what reporting is available inside the platform that you're using, and then from that reporting, see how that can move you towards monitoring what your kids are doing.
Wonderful. Can you guys hear me?
We can, yeah.
Yes, we can. Yep.
Okay, I don't think I can unmute at all. I think I just have I'm always unmuted. So wonderful. That leaves us at about 15 minutes where we would really love to have the opportunity to open it up for questions from our panelists.
And I do have some questions for you guys if you want to take some of those.
Oh, okay.
Perfect.
All right. So the first one is, let's see, I understand the keeping it light and fun. I agree. However, how do you address parents thinking they need more work for their kids? In other words, they can't seem to manage their kids at home, and now they know that we've been doing each day with their children.
Yeah, so I think we can all probably answer this, but this is Kelly, and I find that funny because I had that same question from one of my teacher friends, and what I told her was if some of the parents want more work, I think that it's okay to provide that, because you're going to have some parents like myself that are like, whoa, okay, I think you're doing great. The amount of work is wonderful. A little bit less would even be appreciated, certainly not more, but there are those parents that do want more, and whether it be because they want to keep their kids busy or they don't feel their kids are getting 7 or 8 hours of work like they were in the classroom, which they weren't really getting that. But I think there's so many resources, and we certainly have all of those at our fingertips, especially with all of this that's happened, that we would be happy to send some of that, but just maybe send them some additional things that they can do. That it's not expected for all your students to do this, but if a parent is requesting, I need more to keep my child busier or to do more, just give them some additional websites maybe to go to, like whether it's reading, whether it's math, and say, have your child work on these things or in this site for an hour. But I'm sure that Carrie and Ashley probably have some additional suggestions.
I was going to say that's where a really great opportunity to at least open up for like book clubs or some type of virtual kind of, maybe they could meet, they could read something on their own and maybe meet with a couple other kids that they could discuss. It might be a good opportunity to do that. But, just like when you're in the brick and mortar classroom, I'm sure you're going to have the parents that are, going to say, oh, my child could be getting more, and so I would just offer similar what you might do in the regular brick and mortar classroom also is just find some additional activities that might be beneficial to them, maybe some little at-home projects or something that they could work on. I would guess that the parents are probably looking for something to keep the students busy, especially if the parents are at home as well working and would like them to continue to work on studies. So finding some at-home activities that now the platform and the curriculum that I'm using is pretty challenging for the kids, and it does have a lot, so they are pretty busy, but they could probably get their school day done a lot quicker than if they were to be in school all day long too. So I would encourage finding some, maybe, and that's probably a good thing to add on is maybe some additional activities that you could post somewhere or share somewhere for those families that are looking for something for the students to participate in if they need more.
Yeah, I would suggest coming up with a list of something that maybe you call if time activities, right? These are not anything that is required, but if you have time, here are things that you can do. So we're talking about line graphs, and you've done all of these practice things. If there's time, call 10 of your relatives and figure out how tall they are, and then make a poster that shows the line graph of your relative's height. So just these things that take it another step farther. That's not required, but it does give them something else that they can do. I don't have this question come up with my secondary students very often because they're filling their time, right? But I can see it with my second grader. Even if I tell him to go do something, if I tell him to read, he's not as likely to embrace that than he is if his teacher told him that this is a required thing that he has to do, right? And so sometimes we want the teacher to tell our kids this is what you need to be doing with your time, because they are less likely to argue about it. So I understand that reasoning. I get it. I would create some of those if time activities that take the learning a step farther without also, giving a headache and frustration to students that aren't able to get to that.
I saw a great thing posted on on Facebook today an activity that I thought was so cute for elementary, which is, you know, like the old flat Stanley. They've made a picture of the teacher themselves and they've sent it among. So then now suddenly the teacher is now traveling from student to student within the class. So I thought that was cute. So it encourages writing as well. So. All right.
Great. Thank you guys for answering that question. So let's see. One of the next questions is, how many students do you teach in a middle school setting?
That is
Yeah. So we have classrooms we have classrooms of one, essentially, is how we always look at virtual education. So it's a little bit different for our community and our population of students we service. So we might have, let's say we have 40 students. We look at it as 40 students of a classroom of one. So we've individualized a lot of things. For you guys, you're going to be a little bit different because your students essentially are all in the same place at the same time. And ours, when we have our students that we typically work with, they tend to be in their own place at their own time, and scattered all over. So we have to be very, very diligent and very intentional in how we bring them together for a meaningful instructional practice and time. But do you have, Ashley, Carrie, anything specific?
Yeah, I find the most success, I think that I'm assuming that the question is really getting at how many kids should I have in a session at a time of middle schoolers in order to be the most successful, because my personal caseload doesn't affect how many kids I have in my live lesson at 11 o'clock on Mondays, right? I have found the most success in approximately 15 students at a time in my large group instruction. That allows me to get enough feedback from lots of people that it keeps the flow of the lesson going well, but that there aren't so many people that we get bogged down in, I can't take any questions because it would be coming at me from all over. So 15 for me is the magic number teaching a math class. And more than that certainly is fine. If you have a class of 30 people and all 30 show up, that's amazing. But I would, if that's regularly happening, break it into, hey, I'm going to offer this at 12 and at 12:30, and you can pick which one you want to attend. So that way it breaks it into some smaller segments.
I also have pretty small groups when they come for live sessions. So I've had up to about 10 at the most usually. So pretty lucky that way. So.
Excellent. And then somebody just asked if you had any recommended platforms.
Do you mean a learning management system or for these extra resources? Are you able to
I'm
tell
not
that?
sure no, it's the same person that just asked about teaching in a middle school setting. So I'm going to think it's probably kind of related, but they just said recommended platforms. In fact, that person, if they want to kind of write in a little more specific what you're looking for, we could jump down to the last question after that one, which was, do any of you use Study Island?
Yeah, so yes, so
Well,
those
yes.
we are Adventum employees, so Study Island is definitely one of ours. I can say that I have my own children doing Study Island, as well as we have a diagnostic assessment with Edmentum, which is amazing, ExactPath, and my kids use ExactPath. And then we have courseware, which is essentially what we work with for the secondary students, 6 through 12, which is amazing, everything in one place, a single sign-on, so the students just sign on one time, they get all of their content in one place. And then we have Calvert that we also use with our our elementary K-5 students, which is the same exact thing. So we do use Study Island. I use it as a parent, and then we use it across our schools as well. And Rick can jump in as well. He's very familiar with all of those. So.
Hi, everybody. Yeah, absolutely. So our platforms are designed to be flexible, provide personalized learning. You know, the platform that we use is very conducive to data and making data-driven decisions based on students' progress. So, I mean, absolutely, in any platform that you currently have or are thinking of using, I mean, those are the questions that you have to ask yourself of what's going to provide that biggest ROI for those buckets. I mean, you have to have something that's going to provide academic rigor and make those data-driven decisions. So yes, absolutely. So those are our platforms, and I know there are others out there, but not all of them, I don't think, provide such fidelity across all areas, all sectors. It just depends.
And the person who had asked about the recommended platform said, meaning one place is a single sign-in, and they said you just answered their question. So, excellent. Well, I don't see any other questions. Is there anything else you guys want to talk about, just to kind of wrap things up?
No, I think we're good.
I would just encourage you that you have the ability to do this. It's hard, but you can do hard things. You can do it.
We did it.
And the last thing I would say, yeah, we did it, is that sometimes I think people look at technology as a barrier, and it changes, maybe it's a roadblock or a restriction to what they could do in the classroom. And I think having really what we have found is technology is a vehicle that can really create wonderful opportunities for families and for students to continue to thrive and continue to learn. And so navigating that process and allowing yourself to try something and maybe it doesn't work and give grace and ask for feedback, but realizing that it's really, really going to be a fantastic thing for your families and kids. And even if and when we go back, I hope that you continue to implement a piece of this so that they can continue to explore and experience in the world of technology and how that can enhance your teaching and learning.
Absolutely. And I'd like to thank Kelly, Carrie, Ashley, and Corey especially. Thank you so much for setting this up. And I'd like to invite everybody to come to our next week's session. It's going to be just we want it to be an open discussion. So you guys will have the freedom to unmute yourself, talk, ask questions. That's what we're here for. We want to provide the best information that we have over these 50 combined years plus experience teaching in the virtual environment as well. So please come to that. It'll be at the same time a week from today.
Well, thank you guys so
really
much for presenting.
Yep.
Excellent. Well, thank you guys so much for presenting, and thank you all so much for attending. I will be following up to all attendees with an email with a link to the recording of this session, and also a link to register for next week's session. And like Rick said, we definitely advise you to do that, because that'll be a great opportunity to ask some questions maybe you'll get between now and then. Thank you again so much, and wish you all a great rest of your week.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.